Well, Donald Trump went to court today, and once again, New York City did not care. Now, you might recall that there was much misplaced public worry about what could happen the very first time defendant Trump had to go to court in New York City facing his first criminal indictment, what seemed like years ago, but was actually a very pleasant spring day only 6 months ago. Donald Trump has been indicted 3 more times since then in much more serious cases, making that first court appearance in New York as a criminal defendant a distant memory now. Donald Trump publicly begged his supporters then to show up and protest in Manhattan on that day when they refused to come, even though there are millions and millions of Trump voters living within an hour's drive of Manhattan and thousands living in Manhattan itself. A couple of dozen very peaceful Trump supporters showed up that day. I went down there and I walked among them that day correctly, having absolutely no fear at all of what they might do, especially because the violent Trump supporters who were willing to riot for him were already in prison or out on bail awaiting trial for the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. One of the effects, intended effects, of criminal prosecution is deterrence. And every potentially violent Trump nut in America now knows that there is nothing Donald Trump can do to save them from going to prison if they want to go to an American courthouse and go to war for Donald Trump. So there hasn't been a whiff of violence or any even unruly protest at any of the Trump court appearances. And today in Manhattan, Donald Trump became just another guy from Queens whose life took enough wrong turns for him to end up as a defendant in the Manhattan courthouse. He is a civil defendant in this case charged with fraud by New York State's Attorney General. Donald Trump has obviously decided to attend the trial not because of what happens in the courtroom, but so that he can dominate the media coverage of the trial by making statements outside of the courtroom before and after the court session and during the recess breaks. Donald Trump did that relentlessly today. We will show you nothing of what he had to say in those statements because they are filled with lies. Lies about New York's Attorney General and the judge in the case, and what we will show you, the occasional outright hallucination about Joe Biden.
If I didn't run, I'd be sitting right now at a beach like Biden does.
Everything Donald Trump said outside the courtroom was specifically designed to distract from the actual elements of the case inside the courtroom. He did say one thing that is relevant to his defense in the case, and that is the fraud that he is accused of perpetrating by overstating his wealth and obtaining bank loans actually harmed no one. Here's what Donald Trump said outside the courtroom about those loans. They were paid back on time. There was no default. There were no problems. The banks got back their money. Again, it was never a default. It was never a problem. Everything was perfect. There was no crime. Andrew Weissman will analyze the legal validity of that statement in a moment. The hundreds and hundreds of other words Donald Trump said for the cameras were entirely irrelevant and/or outright lies and hallucinations, including his vicious lying attacks on New York's Attorney General, Letitia James, and his even more intense attacks against the judge in the case, who Donald Trump lied about relentlessly. If you're really eager to hear Donald Trump lying about the judge, you can hear that on other programs or online, but not here. Donald Trump's plan in showing up at the courthouse today was to get TV coverage for his lies. The ongoing challenge in covering Donald Trump continues to be, as it always has been, how to cover Donald Trump without helping to amplify his lies and deliver them to even more people. Donald Trump did speak in the courtroom today, but only in portions of a video recorded deposition for the case. In the deposition testimony revealed in court today, we discover that, of course, Donald Trump's in-house accountant, Alan Weisselberg, who has pleaded guilty to committing criminal fraud while working for Donald Trump, is not a real accountant. Competence has never been a reason for Donald Trump to hire people, and that is certainly the case with Alan Weisselberg, who, in his under oath testimony, admitted he doesn't know anything about generally accepted accounting principles, which in accounting are identified by the initials GAAP, pronounced GAAP.
If I said the phrase GAP, GAAP, are you familiar with that acronym?
I've heard of that, yes.
Okay. Tell me everything you know about GAAP. What is GAAP?
Generally accepted accounting principles. I don't know what's in GAAP. I never took the CPA exam.
Okay.
And never studied for it. So I don't know all the various components of what GAAP is.
Are there any components you know about what GAAP is?
Not really.
Accountants who don't take the exam come cheap. And of course, Donald Trump's guy never took the CPA exam, never studied for it. The fraud case is about GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, and Donald Trump's continued violation of generally accepted accounting principles, which he, in his under oath testimony, in his deposition, blamed on Alan Weisselberg.
To meet your obligation here of presenting the information in accordance with GAAP, was Alan Weisselberg responsible for that?
Object to the form.
I would say yes.
So Donald Trump, in his under oath deposition, said the person whose obligation it was to follow generally accepted accounting principles was Alan Weisselberg, who testified under oath that he doesn't know what they are.